Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Dr. Candace Crony, who is the director for the Purdue Center for Animal Welfare Science, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Suresh Neetharajan. Before I get going on Dr. Suresh's bio, we have a few people to thank. First of all, we want to thank the College of Agriculture, College of Veterinary Medicine for helping support the seminar, the Center for Animal Welfare Science as well. And then, of course, Ms. Marianne Welsh and Dr. Ting Ju, Barbara List, and Michael Delgado helping with organizing. So thank you so much. So Dr. Neetharajan is from Dalhousie University. If you're wondering where that is in Canada. So Dr. Neetharajan is an associate professor and university research chair at Dalhousie University. He's cross-appointed between the Faculty of Agriculture and the Faculty of Computer Science. He leads the Mu Analytica Research Group, focusing on AI-driven precision livestock farming, digital agriculture, and interspecies communication. His research integrates AI, computer vision, biosensors, and natural language processing to enhance animal welfare, sustainability, and farm productivity. Suresh is passionate about interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research, bringing together expertise from computer science, animal science, ethics, and engineering to tackle complex challenges. His work spans AI ethics, animal-centered computing, and human-animal computer interactions, bridging fundamental science with real-world applications. So if you're not familiar, he's written quite a lot of papers, really straddling the engineering space and the animal behavior and welfare space. So we're really fortunate to have him. So thank you so much, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Marisa. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. I express my gratitude and thank you to Dr. Professor Candace Crony in the Department of Animal Science for this opportunity to connect with you and to share with you what we have been doing for the past few years. A disclaimer, I'm not a traditionally classically trained animal scientist. I'm basically an agricultural engineer who happened to work in this space for the past few years. Algorithms are redefining what it means to be a farm animal. Right now, when we visit multiple farms, either a dairy farm or a chicken poultry farm, or even swine farm, we know that algorithms decide many of the elements of how the animal's behavior constantly collect data points. Sometimes it feels like animals are just a mere data point, dictated and decided and influenced by the algorithms. So in this complex way, does the animals have any autonomy? Can they be able to express their own innate, inherent preferences? What exactly mean animal agency? Travel agency, education agency, and so on. But what does agency mean? How can we learn and how can we use that for the benefit of this complex triad of human, animal, and technology or computers? So, for example, there are two different ways we can look at it. One is preferential choices. Can the animal be able to make and express their own likings and dislikes? If you walk into a dairy farm, the herds and cows are being fed into milking parlor. The gates automatically open. There is a light that is on. There is a sound that is deciding, making the animals to go through a certain path and making it to go through a milking parlor. So this is an involuntary, manipulated way of making the animal go through and behave in a certain way. On the other hand, if the cow, she likes, whenever she likes, she feels like she can go through the milking parlor on her own without any of these external influences, perhaps that is a display of the inner choices of that particular animal. If you look at the poultry industry, a laying hen or a broiler industry, in a enriched caging system, the birds are housed and there is a constant automated feeding system. Water is available continuously for 24 hours. Feeders kick on. There is a sudden light coming up, and at certain scheduled time, the lights goes off. So in this particular scenario, birds may feel like they are being funneled to a certain section of the belt conveyor or the enriched caging system to be able to lay the eggs or to be able to move around. So the stocking density is being changed, dictated by these automated technologies, guided by AI, maybe, or other instrumentation sensor technologies. So in this, maybe in another case, the laying hens has the ability to be able to demonstrate its preferences. So is it a mere reactivity or a true preferential ability to check the autonomy, the agency? So in terms of many applications from the human being's perspective, as a human being, we have been doing farming for, many thousands of years. Hey, I give you water, I give you shelter, I give you feed and food, you give me this back, maybe milk, maybe egg, or maybe meat. So there is a transaction, objectification, anthropomorphism, of course, plays a role. But in this context, how far we can go in terms of making effort to understand their actual liking, disliking, the preferences of these animals. Can we be able to fully understand the sentience of these animals, the ability, the emotional makeup of these animals? So there are a lot of benefits associated to it from an economical perspective, but from the ethics and welfare perspective, there are a bunch of normative questions we have to keep on asking. So from minimizing suffering to maximizing agency. Obviously, when I talk about the benefits associated to it, perhaps it's not fully unraveled yet. Lots of research need to be done. We know that a happy animal is a productive animal. When we keep a cow much more happier, emotionally, through positive welfare approaches, through enrichment strategies, the quality of milk, not necessarily the quantity, but the quality of the milk may be much more richer, much more nutritious. There are clear scientific evidences when they do different biochemical analysis, there is a correlation between the affective states of the animals versus whatever it's produced, either an egg or the milk from the animal. There are also resilience factor. For example, if an animal go through a specific disease challenges, external stressors, how long it takes for the animal to recover, that particular time may be much more quicker if you keep the animal happier, enriched, and in a positive way. So, which means the operation cost goes down. The quality and the length of life of the animal they can live is much longer than these controlled, manipulated, less animal agency environment. So there are other benefits and other factors we could consider from the production perspective. Of course, as a human being, we have our own values. From an evolutionary perspective, Darwinian evolution, we as a human being express empathy. We have compassion. We have unique abilities. So how do we care for them? Can we be able to treat them as co-creators, that we coexist in this world rather than as an object, rather than as a transaction-based, I give you this, you give me back, so we live together. So how do we go from this transaction-based analysis to a co-creation, empathy, and compassion-based farming? So those are some of the questions we can look at it. So the precision livestock farming technologies have advanced quite a bit. It's been 25, 30 years. Now people are starting using, trying to replace with the word digital livestock farming rather than precision. So the word digital is more about accuracy, more about sensitivity, more about specificity. Can we be able to move from reactive to predictive via proactive approaches? For example, if avian influenza is going to happen in exactly 3 months, by a combination of multimodality with artificial intelligence systems, can we be able to predict it based on telltale signs, combination of changes in the logistics, environment, some hiccups happen in other species that can possibly translate into this specific domain? What is the way we can move to that particular predictive capabilities that is being offered by digital livestock farming? So in addition, of course, you can save time, labor, and so on and so forth. But the decision-making capacity, farmers are able to make decision in a remote way much more efficiently. For example, when we look at it in terms of the egg production or the milk production, how do we assess it? Primarily, when I had a conversation with a bunch of farmers in Atlantic Canada or in other states and provinces, typically they use the word numbers or production metrics. I have this many number of animals. This is the production per month. So the first thinking happens from the quantitative metrics, production metrics perspective, which is fine. But can we be able to infuse compassion and empathy from that particular angle, from that particular lenses with which some of the farmers are viewing the animals? So that is a question we need to look at in terms of creating the balancing act. It's kind of two sides of the coin. Welfare, sometimes it's being perceived as a nuance, it's a barrier, it's a hurdle for me to do farming operations. The other side, it enhances well-being, it creates more value and so on. How do we create this balancing act? So we can see we came up with about 18 different factors associated to potential benefits of animal agency and also risks to animal agency. For example, if you look at here, robotic milking systems, of course, the cows can go on their own to milk. It's an alignment with natural rhythms, her circadian rhythms and the bodily physiological needs. So it reduces the stress. But maybe when we put artificial intelligence and decision support systems, it can cause us over-reliance on the technology so that the empathy component and the human-animal interaction component is missing or reduced. Farmers may slack, hey, you know what, my system can take care of this, so I don't have to pay sufficient attention. So there is a slack, there is a reduction in the empathy value from the farmers. So how do we handle this from the animal agency perspective? So, for example, automated climate systems, of course, for a laying hen, there is a improved air quality and reduced stress from the environmental factors because it's automatically adjusted. But again, think from the perspective, if there are about 10,000 birds or 80,000 birds in the production floor, it's all a common system. It's not localized to a group of birds, so which is commonly available. So do we still miss that mark of creating true animal agency by giving individual care that's needed? Again, there is an over-reliance on technology and so on. So there is also an intentionality. For example, if we constantly go and use artificial intelligence-based technology, for example, as a student use ChatGPT, maybe there is a new regulations that says you cannot over-rely on ChatGPT for your assignments. Perhaps use Copilot from Microsoft because we have better way to handle the generative AI assessment and usage of these tools for your assignments and for other mark. Or maybe you submit an extra 2-page document showing exactly use ChatGPT, but tell what is it that you have learned from it. What are the barriers and challenges? How differently would you do? What is your own contribution as a human contribution in addition to the ChatGPT generated content? So there are different ways to assess this. So the intentionality plays a role. How do we go about, can technology replace animal intentionality, or does it inherently constrain it? What is the barrier? What is the depth with which technology can be commonly infused with how we do things in animal science and animal production systems? Okay, now I have given you certain perspectives, certain ideas. I'm going to give you maybe 5 or 6 examples of what we have been doing in this technology development arena. So we use satellite data. We have partnership with some of the satellite companies, European Space Agency, here in NASA, Sentinel-2, Sentinel-5P, and also Landsat satellites. We collect a variety of emissions-related data for both cows and poultry farms. So in Canada, if you look at, there are about 9,500 dairy farms coast to coast, and about 1,300 poultry farms. In addition to that, we also collect data of the methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide emission from each and every locations over a 14-year period. So in addition to these data, we partnered with a milk processing, milk testing company called Lactinet. Through data sharing, we collected data about the production metrics, the genetic values, the calcium, somatic cell count, milk urea, nitrogen in the milk. We collect all of these data, and then we correlated using artificial intelligence models, XGBoost, random forest, and other model to come up with a way of creating, okay, for this particular farm in this particular state, to be able to produce 1 liter of milk, what is the methane equivalent? How much of methane is being emitted in the atmosphere? Similarly, we did for eggs. To be able to produce 1 egg for a medium-sized farm for a certain number of birds, how much of CO2 is being emitted? Again, with the help of artificial intelligence-based models. Second test here is we developed a combination of AI and accelerometer sensor technology to measure and identify the lameness. The idea here is, before the cow become lame, can I be able to tell at least 1 month in advance based on the facial features and based on the walking ability and the other locomotion-based parametrics? So we selected a bunch of cows. We put different sensors in the legs, accelerometers. These are bought from a Finland-based company called Fibion. So they tell us how long the cow is walking, how many steps they make, is it right side of the body they are lying, left side of the body. We collect a bunch of locomotion-based metrics, and then based on the facial features, how the squinting of the eye happens, how much of the eye whitening happens, what is the posture of the ear, is it droopy, symmetrical, asymmetrical, erect, how much of the muzzle pattern changes. So we collect all of these data using AI-based biometric assessment. When we pool these 2 different data from 2 different modalities, we are able to come up with a framework and say to at least 85 to 87% accuracy. Again, scalability still need to be done. Based on the data we have collected, there is a possibility to predict lameness even before this happens. So the idea here is, in near future, you install a bunch of cameras in the ceilings and the walls, monitor the cow continuously, and based on the data collection, based on either the RFID tag or the neck collar sensor or the leg collar accelerometer, by combining these 2 data, we can say something about lameness and predict it. So some of the results we can see here, there is a GradCam model. The idea here is we can, using specific AI models, we can look at heat signatures based on the changes in the heat that is emitted from different phases and different regions of the body. We can say something about their stress they are going through. So emotions. So measuring emotions or affective states is a popular research topic. People have been looking at this in Europe. Here also it's slowly emerging. How do we truly understand the affective states of the animals? Can I, as a farm owner, as an animal scientist, as a researcher, do I truly know what the animal is going through in terms of the mental makeup? Is it frustration? Is it disappointment? Is it bored, happy, sad? How do we really pinpoint? How do we really quantify and measure these? So a variety of experiments are possible. We validate them based on the timestamp, collecting the cow dung or manure, urine, milk, blood samples, and do chemical analysis to look at these stress markers, cortisol and neuroendocrine markers, and so on. But the same data time point is available via a variety of data, combination of imaging, combination of thermal camera data, and so on and so forth. So this tells us, how do we truly understand the sentience of these animals? So one of my master students, she's currently developing a tool called Diary DigiD. So we collected data from faces of cows, about 900 cows across 15 different farms in Atlantic Canada. And then we developed Detectron model. Detectron is a Facebook-based model. A portion of that model is currently used in the airport. Sometimes when you go to some of the airport, you don't have to do anything, just stand in front, automatically scans, refer the database. So it's a similar model, Detectron. So can we be able to adapt something developed for human beings to for animals? What kind of changes needed from the algorithmic perspective? How do we make sure that it is not violating or blindsiding some of the shortcomings of this particular algorithmic process? So that's one of the idea behind it. We also did a bit of annotation, 30 different key point annotation we did on the faces. For example, if you look at the ear here, there are about, muzzle, middle muzzle, right top muzzle, lower left muzzle, middle lower muzzle. Similarly for eye, right eye, and so on and so forth. So we came up with a systematic way of annotating the 30 different features. And then we did about 8,500 images, manual annotation. And then the second one was a semi-automatic annotation. We used the AI-based tool to annotate additional set of images to run through it to see, okay, how far the AI-based annotation is more or less closer to the human-based, ethologist-based annotation. Then after validation, we run through an AI model to be able to check. So when another objective of this study was, can we be able to automate when we put the cameras, okay, she is less than 2 years old, she's pregnant, oh, she's going to go dry cow, we need to move her to the next herd. How do we enable that decision-making capacity to the farmers? So based on the consultations and the veterinary records, we have different classes or groups of cows. And then we did a systematic analysis to create a classification system using this Diary DigiD and DenseNet model, 2 different models we evaluated. Young cows, dry cows, pregnant and mature milk, some of the results we can see here. Another project currently we are working on is called social network analysis. How do we know cows like each other? How often they are expressing antagonistic behavior or synergistic behavior when they hang out with each other in their bond? They go out for exercise. Based on the video data, we can say preliminary results says that some cows prefer to hang out with the specific cows because the movement pattern, the locomotion pattern is unique in terms of choosing how they want to hang out. So these certain subtleties, certain nuances can be easily unraveled with the help of artificial intelligence. This comes quite handy in terms of decision making, in terms of enabling the farmers to do intervention. Okay, she needs certain attention. Let's provide a change in the feed in terms of supplement to be able to improve her gait or reduction in the methane emissions and so on. So it's an ongoing project. We have been looking at changing certain, actually the data set you can see here, you might recognize. This is from here, Purdue University. The form is the Purdue University form. It's called the cows data set. The data was collected here by Christopher Choi and another group. So we also have data from New Brunswick data. So again, some of these results, how we validate, what we say is that it's not fluke. We systematically validate that, yes, it's indeed closer to what is expected by manual input and so on. So there are some of the, these are very interesting projects currently we are working on. Can I be able to use artificial intelligence to clearly decode what the cows and chickens are speaking about? in a way that humans can understand, semantics-based, natural language-based. So we did a variety of experiments in our own lab, but we also collected, for example, in China, there is a data set available. They induced avian influenza low pathogenic strain for a group of birds, and then for a group of birds, they are control samples. In another data set, they were induced stress by suddenly opening an umbrella or playing any external noises. So similarly, we had about 5 different data sets, and then we were looking at how the ontology, semantics, linguistics changes. So we do lots of background subtraction. We pick exactly what the bird is making in terms of the sound. We look at different features. We call MFCC, mel frequency substral coefficient features. We extract these features and then correlate to that particular context, whether it's delayed feeding or a change in a temperature or humidity. What is the role? Sometimes the LED lighting colors, sometimes it switches between red versus white versus blue. So what is the influence of the change in the color in the vocalization? Similarly, we analyzed all of this. So when we do the semantic-based analysis, we can also do what we call a sentiment scoring. So we can understand whether it's positive, neutral, or negative. So initially, when we extract these words, they look like nonsense, nihai, kimuchi, or certain letters and words. But when we look at from the context-based perspective, they make certain sense because certain words constantly, continuously appear if that particular context is being introduced or that particular data is collected. So unigram, bigram, trigram, and we can do further analysis. So there are different models, for example, open language-based whisper model, hidden Marco, hugging face model, and so on and so forth. So this really tells us, hey, you know what? There is a possibility for us to develop a tool called Chicken Translator, a little box, you put it in the poultry farm, the birds are making sound, it's being recorded, sent to the cloud, we do the processing, the farmers at the dashboard and the iPad, they can see, oh, you know what? We need to change this. There is a certain alarm. The birds are calling for my attention. So that's the idea behind this vocalization, farm animal bioacoustics in understanding this. Similarly, we also did, this is a European collaboration for cows. So cow-calf contact. So right after giving birth to the calf, we remove the calf for 4 hours, and then we bring it back. So during this process, we continuously collect video on the audio, like neck-based audio recording devices. So we look at how this device is going to, the idea behind this is they make high frequency calls and low frequency calls. When we look at these vocalization sound data, there are lots of information buried in it, amplitude, pitch, frequency. There is a lot of energy gap, pause, stress, and so on. So how these variations happen and how do we extract those information to be able to find out their inner makeup, their affective states related indicators. So that's the type of data we collected. Here we can see some of these metrics here. Pair plot of acoustic features. Again, this is an ongoing study. Next month, we are doing the second trial with entirely different context to data collection to see, like a chicken translator, is it possible to develop a cow translator or a moo call translator to better understand the context and the emotion state of the birds? Another project is called digital twins. So when I use the word digital twin, you might have seen, maybe you can use the word avatar. I am standing in front of you, talking, giving this presentation, a similar figure like this driving a Uber taxi, making some bucks. Or maybe it's, sitting in a house, a home theater, enjoying the movie. So it's a similar replica but it's doing entirely different function. The same concept, can we be able to emulate a physical, biological entity, or it could be an operation, not necessarily a animal, it could be a specific unit operation of that form. If we can be able to emulate, can that provide certain benefits, certain things that cannot be done right now? That's the idea behind digital twin. So here in this case, we were looking at twinning the precision nutrition of dairy cow using digital avatar technologies. So it's an ongoing project. Shreya is a student who's been looking at working on this. So again, it's a combination of video data. There's a certain physiological data, how much of nutrition is going inside, how do we go about precisely feeding rather than feeding the cow continuously 24 hours, the feed is available. Are there unique way of meeting the individual needs of the cows? So that's some of the questions we have been looking at in this project. Okay, now we're coming back to animal sentience and emotions. So if you look at the whole spectrum of the globe, Netherlands, New Zealand, and some of the Scandinavian countries they are a bit far ahead in terms of passing legislation, recognizing the sentience of the farm animals and other animals. But when we look at certain countries, here, especially here in North America, Canada, and United States, certain states, we have welfare act, welfare regulation, very strict. But certain states, they still need to change certain regulations to be able to meet. Especially in Canada, if you look at it, Quebec is a bit far ahead compared to the rest of the provinces. A few years ago, there was a stray dog. It was hit by a car. And there was a humongous riot. People were creating so many social media posts because the veterinarians and the scientists are saying the dog should be euthanized. There is a big group of people saying that, no, you cannot kill the dog. So it took almost many days to be able to come to that conclusion while the dog was going through that particular suffering. So in this gray area, gray zone, how does animal agency play a role? How do we go about informing the decision makers here? So do animals need to be continuously monitored? Because I have developed technology. Just because I have developed technology, it should be implemented. Is there a genuine need for this continuous monitoring? Is it still a purpose, economy-driven need rather than the animal needs are being met? Is there such thing called dignity for animals? Do animals have real inherent values? Can we be able to understand their inner likings and dislikes through the usage of technology in the context of ethics and animal agency? Another thing is we are sorry. So empathy versus efficiency. For example, just because we have these latest technologies, constant usage of AI-based systems, does it change our own inner working of we as being a human? Does it bring down the empathy aspects of us as human beings? So, for example, if the decisions are being continuously made by the AI system, does human have a role? How much of autonomy, how much of decision making can be given to artificial intelligence, or it has to be held within the human beings or the farmers or the animal caretakers themselves? So that's the question to ponder about. Objectification, of course, there is still, broadly speaking, animals are still being recognized as mere data points. How do we change that perspective of numbering, metrics-based assessment to respecting them, to be able to value the animals? So compassion, intuition, and empathy plays really a significant role. But again, when we look at the law-based, governing guidelines, we did a bit of survey from Atlantic Canada about 15 different poultry producers and 32 dairy farmers in 2 different conferences. So some of the bigger things that came out of that survey, qualitative metrics, was unless there is a mandatory regulation by the government, farmers are not willing to put that extra effort. Or they have to see a certain value from the economic perspective. Oh, you know what? This is fine. It's going to bring down my time. I don't need to depend on labor a lot. There is an economic value to it. Then I can embrace it very quickly, that particular AI-based tool or a technology. So these factors still play a significant role in terms of, or the watchdog agency's role. Even when among the countries, when we have conversations, certain countries, the guidelines and rules are there, but it's not strictly implemented by these watchdog agencies. So it's like a mere production perspective. It's going to bring me more money, so let us do this particular technology. But in countries, developed countries, the rules are being enforced very, very strictly, so they have to adhere. So those also plays a significant role from the sociological perspective in adoption and the embracing of the technology. So again, when we look at the welfare aspects, it's not mere ticking a checkbox. Okay, this is being done. I'm being 5 freedoms of model. Everything is being taken care of. How do we go beyond that? Can I be able to show meaningful empathy, meaningful compassion, rather than just compliance? So that's some of the aspects we need to look at it from the technology development perspective. So there are multiple ways the law is being taken care of. For example, animals have intrinsic value and an interest in living good lives. So in the shorter period of time, we have already violated as a human being the biological limit of these animals. If you look at the broiler chicken, amount of feed required to gain certain weight in 1957 versus 2025, 1/3 of the amount of feed based on variations in technology, the broiler can quickly gain weight. We are able to bring down the time, bring down the resources. So that's the argument on one side. Another argument from the swine side, pig industry is, hey, within 3 to 4 months, the pig is able to gain 300 kilogram of weight. Do you know how much of stress it's putting on the heart of the pig? So you are violating the biological limit of the pig just because of your production efficiency and the need for the economical gain. So how do we balance this? Is there something else that could be done in terms of addressing these concerns from the ethical perspective? So the impact on the animals and rigorous evaluation is also very, very important. Again, we came up with about 31 different categories of ethical considerations. How do we actually implement it? What are the gray zone areas in terms of the interfaces of this triad, human, animal, and artificial intelligence? Who are the players? Who needs to contribute to be able to come up with solutions? It includes students, researchers, and everyone. There are 4 key takeaways, I would say. Number one is, just because an AI company comes with a technology does not mean that the company does not have a moral responsibility. The company, just beyond detection, it has to look at the intervention also. The company has to work with the farmers, producers to be able to implement welfare-related practices. There is a much more meaningful contribution is needed. Number 2, in terms of the AI-based technologies, transparency. Whatever is being developed in terms of technology, can they be able to use XAI or explainability AI to show how the decisions are being made? Can they be able to release the data publicly, in terms of sensitivity versus specificity? If the detection of lameness in the chicken, is it 1 in 100? 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000. This matters a lot. If in terms of specificity, how often the judgment calls are being made by the AI, how many true positives or false positives are there in this case. So how do we go beyond just relying on AI? The third one is in terms of automating, in terms of decision support capacity, do we still allow only AI to do it? Perhaps not. The full automating, finalizing decision-making capacity has to be from the human being side, but not from the artificial intelligence side. So these are some of the governing framework in terms of how do we move about, how do we use AI as an enabler rather than as a master for human beings in this human-computer farm-animal interactions. Between data and dignity, it was a world of serene calmness where pastures lay mute, yet rich with essence to harness, where animals grazed fields and browsed shrubs, as nature totally in control without any shoulder scrubs. But now the calm has turned to noise, for silent beetles have been replaced by toys, where decibels rise to their peak as nature's secrets begin to leak. Silicon chips now track each bite, monitoring masticated cud both day and night, hearing the whispers of the ducks, herds, and calves alike, as no mystery or voices are kept away from the mic. In the quest for knowledge and control, we have pierced nature's heart and stolen its soul. For privacy has been lost like a needle in the dust, as nature's trust in us has been lost. Artificial minds, digital minds have become the new normal. A world once natural has now become formal. Between data and dignity, here we stand, a fragile line, a sinking sand. Can we reclaim what we have undone, or is the battle already lost and won? So thank you so much. Thanks to my students who have been contributing to of all of my research projects, my funding agencies. I express gratitude once again to Center for Animal Welfare Science and the Department of Animal Science for this opportunity to connect with you. Thanks a lot.
We have some time for a few questions. If you have questions that you would like to address to our speaker. And if you are joining us remotely, if you will put those in the chat, we'll be able to read those for him.
Very good talk. Thank you so much. Learned a lot. My question is regarding the balance, and you mentioned balance quite a bit, in terms of what is the best standard of care, what's when you talk about animal welfare and you talk about production, if you want to sell the whole idea of animal welfare, which we all believe we should, what's the line? How far would you take this, and can your system, I'm not asking for your subjective opinion, is it your system able to say this amount of stress is fine, this amount is not? And what is that based?
So the word balance from semantics perspective can be associated to intensity also. So for example, now we still rely upon Paul Ekman's psychological framework, which was developed for humans to assess the emotions. And then we try not to objectify and use the same framework for animal when we look at the development of framework for positive animal welfare indicators and affective state framework for farm animals such as cows, pigs, and chickens. So for example, if I say a chicken is frustrated, how much of frustration? It is a 10% frustration, 20% frustration, 50%. How do we determine, quantify that particular intensity of that particular stress? So it's still vague. That's a one-word answer. But in terms of the adoption, in terms of how much can we go for, it all depends on the context. Context dictates how much we can do. if it's for example, give you an example, 1 in 10, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, in terms of the ability to detect lameness in chickens. If the farm size is maybe 25,000 birds, like a small scale industrial production facility, compared to maybe 500,000 birds. So the context plays, okay, this is the threshold. So it's very hard to come up with, okay, this is a threshold for this particular application. So that's why the human decision-making capacity becomes much more important, more pronounced than AI. AI cannot make the decision. For example, I tell AI, when I train the AI, hey, I want to prevent any lameness issue. I want to make sure that my milk production is this much. So I give all of these input variables, expectations, and etc. And then it's automated. It will disregard the animal's needs, the cutoff threshold, the gray area. It will just cut off. Okay, you have to remove this animal at this exact point from the production system because it's not going to contribute. So there is no real empathy, compassion involved. There is also a bit of lack of science because all are being algorithmically decided from the perspective of expectation of increasing the economical gain. So the context dependent may be the right answer for your question.
Cattle, you have a body condition score.
Yes, BCS, yeah.
Right? And having a obese cow with it's not good. 5 out of 5 is not really healthy dairy cat.
Yeah.
So a certain amount of stress, a certain amount of whatever that is, frustration, the word you used, it's probably productional point of view, it is relevant and important. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just have I guess kind of like a philosophical question.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned about the ethical consideration, like AI application, and which is quite insightful. But I was wondering, let's say I'm looking at the chicken. I think the chicken is aggressive, right? There might be some, like objective parameter, like to measure that. But also there are, like human prejudgment, like when you're working with animals behavior. Like in some animals, let's say in dog, a lot of the time that how they interact and to do with how we interact with them. So I was just wondering, like, like with this AI approach, how do you find out what and how do you adjust the bias, from the human side in judging the animals behavior in the program?
So if I get your question correctly, you are if two animals are interacting with each other, their influence of one animal over other may create bias for the human beings to make a judgment, or the AI technology to decide upon their intervention or behavior.
No, I was actually asking, is it human to program the AI to manage
okay, yeah.
The chicken doesn't know how to do our programming and why AI program. I hope not. But that would be animal. So, but like you see, like how do we know the bias that we introduce to?
Yes, human-based bias. Of course. Yeah, that's so. By the way, chickens are super intelligent. Pigs are very, very intelligent. 3-year-old pig is equivalent to a fully developed pig is equivalent to a 3 or 4-year-old human toddler. That's the equivalency in terms of. If you go to YouTube, if you search Picasso, PIGCASSO, you can see how a pig do an art, paint. You can train the pig to do things. They can use joystick. They have very innate intelligence capabilities. Just we do not know how to understand them better. How do we hone our inner way of working, understanding capacity and capability to be able to unravel their intelligence and appreciate it? From the human bias influence on the development of AI-based systems, yes, Indeed. So that's why if you look at the just 3-4 months ago, European Union, they passed the EUA Act. So that clearly talks about the bias. Here also in the United States, there is, but again, it has a certain issues because it is very generic. It is for manufacturing, biomedical, health, cybersecurity, protecting the privacy of people. There is nothing about animal science or nothing about the animal welfare in it. Very broad context. The EUA are here in US also. So a bit more specific regulation guidelines, policy framework need to be unraveled, evolved, developed for specific to animal welfare. So there is a bit more work needs to be done in how not to do bias. Also from the technological perspective, if you look at it, from 19 industrial revolution to where we are right now, first technology always comes in spying. One country spies on another. It's never released to public. Second, the technology moves to space. So they use latest technology in space, astro program, collecting data, something. The third, it comes to human biomedical. For example, you can measure the heartbeat, respiration rate of the premature baby that is born in an intensive care unit without touching the baby, just by a video call. There is a technology currently under developing. So people are asking, can I use this technology to measure what this person is thinking in a Zoom call? They are thinking like that. So the technology roadmap, when you look at it, the next one from human, it goes to the environmental concerns and other related aspects. The next one is agriculture. So from the technological pathway, so there are certain lessons we could learn from the human biomedical application. Is it true for my own animal science domain? What are the things that can go wrong? So how do we adapt or adopt for my use case scenario in terms of overcoming this bias in the development of the system? But frankly speaking, based on the number of conversations I had with our European partners and here also in the United States, it's still, we are not yet there. Many of the technologies, for example, there is a company called Optifarm UK. They developed a technology to measure broiler-related metrics. It's not still applicable for laying hens. We try to adapt it, doesn't work. There is a technology that's developed for pig vocalization in Belgium. We wanted to apply for cow, doesn't work. We know how to modify. So there is more work need to be done, species specific, context dependent. So certain learnings would bring down the time for this adoption or adaptation for animal-based overcoming bias influence in development of AI.
So kind of like what you were just saying, I could imagine that different animal species communicate in different ways. Like you said, vocalizations in pigs don't work in cows. Maybe they communicate differently. So I'm just wondering, and I never thought about facial expression, but from your experience, maybe you can pick an animal, maybe it's cattle. Is there some body attribute that seems to convey their affective state better than other? Like, is facial expression a better predictor of state than like twitching of the tail or some other attribute?
Yeah. So from a human, again, I'm not anthropomorphizing or objectifying. Face is the index of the mind. That's a proverb people use. It's not applicable for animals, of course, but from the production animal perspective, farmer's perspective, face is a much more better way of extracting, collecting, and depending on the factors than the rest of the body. For example, when they go through the milking parlors, it's easy to capture full faces of the cows. So the way we install the camera for data collection systems, in terms of implementation, data collection, practical application, face is much better. Cameras, of course, you can put at different location and ceiling, but there is a hunch. For example, a hunch of the cow and the gait or the walking ability. Sometimes if the cow is pregnant, of course, it's naturally it's going to have a little bit of hunch. So it creates a bit more possibility for true positive or true negative. So we never depend on one factor. It's always the keyword here is multimodality. We combine the video, we combine the audio, we combine the sound, we combine the thermal or the heat signatures, sometimes the environmental, carbon dioxide, methane, whatever the sensors, room temperature, humidity. So they come in different formats. For example, if you look at the sound, MP4, WAV, numbers, the sensor spits out only numbers, degree Celsius, degree Fahrenheit. Video, if you look at that, it's a certain file, but if you actually look at it, it's pixels. Distribution of pixels, RGB values, different intensity of those RGB, and then that's a per image, and then your collection of images become a video. Frames per second, 30 or 60. So when we look at the unit value, it's just a pixel. So the format values. So it's not just one particular feature. It's hard to say. Okay, this is the if the cow blinks 10 times, she's happy. If the cow turns the head, no, she's sad. No, we cannot tell like that. It's always a combination of multifactorial, multimodal way of making that statement. But again, we still need proper correlation, validation. So that's why we did the chemical analysis, collecting cortisol and other. But once we scale that, for example, I did this for Holstein cows for my temperate region. I go to a specific changing climate, same breed Holstein. Does it work? We need to do more testing to see what is the possibility, how much of error prone accuracy can happen. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation.
You are welcome.
I have a question about the videos that you can find them in a barn. And how do you then identify or track the cow in your inventory? Because you have the video and I would know which cow is that one. Do you have an idea?
They wear tags, they wear ear tags, collar sensors, they have accelerometers mocked, and then that's one way to know, because we collect video is like X, Y axis, what coordinate that particular cow is, and then in certain frame they disappear, they move to another coordinate. So we can actually track how they move around. And then there is also mathematical modeling based correlating that value with the additional data we get.
So my students been working on trying to track birds in different situations, and one of the issues with AI is it's very environmental context specific, right? So a barn here at Purdue doesn't look the same as a barn at Dalhousie. So how can we get to a point where we can actually apply some kind of AI model or algorithm or something to be able to give us information regardless of the barn or the environment at the end?
So the data we collected for lameness and diary disease, they are from 15 farms, 7 in New, 8 in New Brunswick, 6 or 7 in Nova Scotia. All are different. Some are they have robotic milking parlors, robot comes and clean, robot feeding, very advanced. Number of cows also varies. Some are no, they just move around. It's not typed out. They still have the walking ability. So the structure is very different. So it's a computer vision problem. It's not really an AI problem. What kind of algorithms we choose in the CV computer vision perspective, we look at chickens as a specific object. Again, not objectifying from the object, subject object. So object and object moves around. Everything is a background. So we have object 1, object 2, object 3, object 4, number of animals, and everything becomes a background, irrespective of the morphology, structure, shape, color, dimensions. It doesn't matter. So how do we subtract the background from the object? Then it becomes an easy problem. It's not complex to be able to extract information irrespective of the variations and diversity in the data collection background.
Well, seeing no more questions, I'd just like to say, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna follow from that
Okay.
because I understood that like the problem with tracking animals was actually, okay, follow the animal and it merges with another one, and then the computer vision now jumps with the other animal and thinks it's the same animal.
Oh,
That's
we
no
do
longer-
what we call as ID, Digi ID. So for example, we know based on the boundary conditions, if there is a certain number of pixels present, we put a Digi ID to that. So when every subject has an animal, so it doesn't matter, it disappears, comes back, it colludes or headbutting or licking, whatever the interaction happens, they may look alike, but there is a certain Digi ID present inside. So when they move to another, we still call upon that Digi ID to track where exactly they are moving. So it's just a computer science.
So even in like highly dense poultry barns, like you're still.
That's we need to
Yeah.
try, because in a frame, if it's 300 boards, 500 boards, okay. If they become 10,000 boards, they are like occlusion happens. We cannot demarcate what's going on. We all look white in a broiler perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just the number of files you need to train to get to a point where you can identify and track animals, right?
Yeah.
It's labor intensive.
We have to use not manually, not the Google Colab. You would need a bit more advanced computational resource, not necessarily a supercomputer, but bit more server capability to be able to train it.